This is it. The film that started it all. The film that made Nic Cage huge. Well, no, it's not that. But it is, without a doubt, a movie. Meet Peter Lowe. He's a publishing executive. What's a publishing executive, you might ask? Trust me, it's not important. What is important is that this man may or may not be about to turn into a vampire. You thought Morbius invented vampires, didn't you? Tut tut, you silly bastard. Peter is telling his therapist, Dr. Glazer, about his troubles with women. He says he can't live with them. She says, but you can't live without them, can you? And he says, aha, you got me there, Doc. Cut to a club. The story is set in a lovingly depicted 80s New York City. Peter picks a girl up and woos her by talking about Marvel.
The Rubber Man. He's the last of the Fantastic Four that we've been searching for all evening. The missing link. Yes?
Times were different back then. Things heat up back at his pad. Imagine being 25 and living in a place like this. Times were different back then. Just as Peter is nearing third base, something strange happens. A bat puppet on a string enters the room and all hell breaks loose. Peter tries a fun tactic.
Shoot.
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 And the chaos continues. His insane date runs into the hall naked, and little Charles upstairs achieves critical mass. They flee the apartment together, and Nic Cage makes some awesome noises. They take a taxi to God knows where, and that's that. The next morning, Peter bosses around his secretary, Alva. Peter isn't wearing socks. He stares longingly out his window at the hot dog stand. Back in therapy, Peter waxes poetic about his sexy night. He admits that the bat turned him on. Dr. Glazer says surely it was the woman who turned you on. Peter isn't so sure. Later, in the office, Alva tells Peter she's struggling with the task he gave her. He's a dick about it, and she's scared of him. That night, as the 80s synth absolutely rips, Peter cleans up and hits the town. At the bar, his friends are boring him, so he sits down and instantly picks up a woman. Smash cut to them doing some serious movie kissing. Without warning, she bears a pair of fangs and tucks in. Peter says no, but then he says yes. She says, "You chose me." The next morning, Peter is happy as a clam. He cuts himself shaving. Then he brings coffee to his hookup. Only his hookup isn't there. But he thinks she is, I think. It's a weird moment. Peter then joins his previous date, Jackie, at an art gallery. Then he says,
Gotta take a piss.
and bails on her immediately. Peter's feeling weird. You can tell because of the way he is. His date calls and reams him out. Peter lazily reams back.
Yeah, well, fuck you too, sister.
Dr. Glazer wants to know more about the bat. Peter says he was just drunk.
Plus, I was horny.
At work again, Peter spazzes out. Enter Alva. Peter is a dick again. Now, we're at the Munson Diner. Peter is a dick to the waiter. Peter is a dick to everyone. He leaves and spazzes out again. He runs home where mimes are fighting outside. He can't reach his therapist, so he calls Jackie and begs to meet. The mimes carry on. Peter begins hearing things. He spazzes some more, and Jackie has been stood up once again. Suddenly, the woman who bit him, Rachel, returns. Peter has no idea where she came from, but he's down for more bites. The next day, Office Peter shouts at Alva like she's a chipmunk.
Alva!
Then loses it some more. This is the Nic Cage we all know and love. He follows her into the women's bathroom, and a woman isn't pleased.
What the fuck is going on?
Alva says she has a gun. Peter seems to come to his senses, apologizes, and leaves. Time for a meeting of the sexists. They all laugh about their horrible perspective on women. Back at home, Peter properly flips his lid. Meanwhile, Alva rides the subway. Peter screams, "What is happening to me?" Alva gives a singer money. Peter has sexy visions. I don't know what the point of that Alva scene was. In therapy, Cage goes on one of his most iconic rants.
You just put it in the right file. You know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Peter.
H, I,
Peter.
Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z! Huh?
Very good. You know your alphabet.
I never misspelled anything!
Then he realizes it's too bright in the room. Back in the office, he's wearing dollar store Terminator shades. He makes a peace offering to Alva in the form of a pistachio.
Pistachio?
Then he blames his past behavior on some mescaline he took. That's all. But then the pendulum swings in the other direction. Hard. Alva is beginning to suspect that he's not just a dick, but that he is, in fact, insane. On his way home, Peter sees a neon crucifix and falls to his knees. At night, Rachel is with him again. He has absolutely no power here. She is consuming him entirely. She forces him to say,
I love you.
and then he prefers his neck again. Proffers? Prefers? How do you say that word?
Proffers.
They watch Nosferatu on the old cathode ray tube, just in case you didn't know this movie was about vampires. The next morning, Peter talks to his invisible friend in the shower. Peter can't touch his reflection. Peter eats I'm not going to show this part. Alva, terrified of her boss, calls in sick to work. It is revealed that she lives in a very Christian household. Her mother chastises her for trying to play hooky. Then, Peter shows up at her house, catches her doing laundry in her undies, and waves some soup in her face. Soup! She admits she's not sick, and he charms her into returning to the office. In the taxi, Peter compliments her. Then he threatens her. Then he succumbs to the Cage rage.
That goddamn contract is somewhere in those goddamn fucking files!
Alva asks if they can pull over, runs into a shop, and asks her brother Emilio for help. She wants bullets, but all that he has is blanks. Peter whips cash at the cabbie, and his aim is pure. He's mad that the cab cost money, I guess, and he takes it out on Alva. Then, in the bathroom, Peter forgets where he is. Then he spells out the plot for us.
I've become a vampire.
He does the Scooby-Doo run back to his office. He cancels his meetings and closes the shades. His transformation is almost complete. Late at night, Alva is working overtime. Peter's in his office, rocking a new hairstyle that would later inspire Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3. Alva enters with good news, but it's too late. Peter scares the hell out of her and chases her down the hall. He chases her down a flight of stairs, and then he bites her. Suddenly, Peter is with Rachel. He swallows a gun, but it literally does nothing, so he... Did he just... Yeah, okay. He tells Alva that he's a vampire. Then he tells the whole goddamn city that he's a vampire.
I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire! I'm a vampire!
He throws his clothes around. He lies down under his couch. Rachel tells him that his transformation is complete and that he knows what he has to do. The next morning, Alva lays in bed, mortified. Peter tries biting his blanket, but there's no blood in there, silly. He feels for fangs, but finds nothing, so he decides to buy some from a store. Then Scooby-Doo runs to a park bench and pops those suckers in. He calls Dr. Glazer from a payphone, then captures a pigeon and smuggles it into his apartment. Things have gone from bad to worse as he somehow feeds on the dirty bird with his plastic teeth. The sun rises on New York, but Peter will not be seeing it. He waits until night and then hits the streets, blitzed out of his mind. He shoves his way into a club, overpowers the bouncer with a Bruce Lee 0 to 100 gut check, and trips balls amongst the crowd. Look at all those necklines, Peter. Look at all those glorious necklines. Peter hasn't lowered his eyebrows in at least 3 days. He finds a woman in a VIP lounge, and she finds him hilarious, right up until he clamps down on her neck. But can he even draw blood? Actually, yeah, kinda looks like it's working. Yep. Oh, damn. Alright. But those don't look like typical puncture marks. Is this guy a vampire, or is he out of his mind? Peter makes a noise at some people and clears out the room. Rachel shows up and spits on him. Just when he needs her most, she turns on him. Out of the blue, she brings in some stud named Donald and leaves. I did not make that part up. I would never lie to you. Peter does the Morbi shuffle through the crowd and finds Rachel again, but this time it's the real Rachel, not the one that lives in his head. He tries to show her vampire teeth to the people, but to no avail. He's escorted out, where he's then bullied away by the patrons. Peter steps into the sunrise and goes charging off into the distance. Meanwhile, Alva is fully traumatized. She and Emilio decide to pay Peter a visit. But Peter isn't doing well. He tries to commit vampire seppuku, but he doesn't try very hard. He is, well... forlorn is one word for it, I guess. He somehow manages to make it to his appointment with Dr. Glazer. Or does he? As he explains that he thinks therapy is bogus and expounds on the meaning of love, it is revealed that he is still standing in the street, mind entirely surrendered to delusion. Then, inside of his own imagined scenario, the doctor begins to laugh at him. She reveals that the patient who she sees directly after Peter every day, Sharon, is perfect for him, that she suffers from all the same problems. Real-world Peter is quite happy to hear about this. In the daydream, they discover that they're perfect for one another. In reality, Peter says,
Well.
Peter admits to the murder he committed last night, but the women in his fantasy think nothing of it. Peter whistles and heads on down the street. He carries on speaking with his invisible date. Emilio and Alva pull up just in time to see him blowing his top on his front stoop. Emilio heads in after him, breaking the window to get in. Upstairs, Peter carries on morbing out. Emilio enters, flips the couch, and crucifies him with the piece of wood he'd been carrying around. In one last fantastical vision, Rachel tells Peter to dream of her. The chill 80s synth kicks in again, and the movie just goddamn ends. What is it with vampire movies and abrupt endings? Like and subscribe to show some love. Turn on notifications if you love Nic Cage. And check out my gaming channel if you'd like. Link below. See you next time.